Right. Good evening, everyone. We'll make a start. It's the right way to get in. Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's corporate overview group on 18th of November 2025. I would like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. The recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the council's YouTube channel. In addition, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch off your microphones off when you are not speaking. Thank you. And tonight, officers we have with us today is Charlotte Cabanata, Head of Corporate Services, and Katie Brennan, Senior Finance Business Partner. So first item, as always on our agendas, is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Plant this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any? No. Right, thank you. And item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of September 2025. Got any question on those minutes at all? Could I have a show of hands to approve those, please? Thank you very much. Sign them at the end. And right, the next item is the finance and performance management. So over to Katie.
Microphone, thank you. Sorry, good evening, everybody. I know you've got lots of exciting things on the agenda today, so I'll try not to take up too much time with the finance report. So I'll talk through the finance element of the report, and then I'll hand over to Charlotte to do the performance part, and then we'll take questions at the end, if that's okay. So we're reporting the Q2 position this evening. So we've currently got a projected revenue budget efficiency of 0.810 million, and the proposals to earmark this for cost pressures are given in Appendix A and paragraph 4.1. We've got the capital budget efficiencies of 1.466 million. The most significant ones are shown in table 2, and full information including budget changes in Appendix D. Also projected overspend on special expenses of 19,000. So in terms of any significant variances for revenue, mainly the savings are to do with refuse collection, resulting in housing development progressing slower than expected, additional interest, and we've got an allocated contingency budget at the moment. So we are proposing that these are earmarked against the main pressures, which obviously is LGR, simpler recycling in the main. So in terms of the capital underspends, the main underspend is related to a warm home grants. So this has got equal expenditure and funding variance, and is just related to less funding than was originally indicated. In terms of the special expenses, this overspend is mainly due to playground repairs and maintenance, and also security improvements for Bridgeford Park and some responsive works at West Park. The transformation and efficiency plan is meeting its targets and is expected to deliver as expected for the year. over to Charlotte. There's nothing else significant on finance.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. So we're almost halfway through the life cycle of the corporate strategy, and 4 of the original 14 strategic tasks have now been completed. The majority of the remaining tasks are at least 50% complete, suggesting they're on target for completion by the end of the strategy period. At Q2 this year, 8 performance measures have not met their targets, and they are detailed in the report. A midpoint review of the corporate strategy is underway, or at least it will be when we can stop talking about LGR. It'll be reported to the next meeting of this group in February next year. It provides us with the opportunity to align the corporate strategy with local government reorganisation, which of course does not feature in the 2024 to 2028 corporate strategy. I think either Katie or I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on either the finance or performance contained in the report.
Opened it up to the floor for councillors to ask any questions. No. Right. As we say, we're halfway through the year, and is detailed with the pressures and items. So it's comprehensive again, as always. Unless there is any that people have got. I know some areas are covered more in detail at governance and that as well. Right. Okay. Shall go to the recommendations then for it. It's recommended that the projected revenue budget efficiency for the year of 0.810 million, and proposals to earmark this for cost pressures given in Appendix A in paragraph 4.1. B, the projected capital budget efficiencies of 1.466 million, including the budget changes in Appendix D, and the projected overspend on special expenses of 19,000, paragraph 4.7, and D, for the performance exceptions to judge whether further information is required. I think we just have to vote on that. Content with that? There's no questions. Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Right. Moving on to the next item on tonight, is the annual customer feedback report.
Thank you very much. Now you've set the expectation. I'm expecting to whiz through the rest of the agenda with no more questions. I think we can get there. Annual customer feedback report. So this is one, if this is your first time on this group, one that we get every year. And I'm pleased to say that, as in previous years, it's a positive report from my perspective. So this report looks at complaints and compliments that we received over 2024 to 25. So we're about 5 months after the end of that period now. Data is very similar to previous years. We don't have any significant concerns, and there are lots of graphs in the report which hopefully demonstrate that quite easily. In terms of the summary data, we had 64 complaints overall over a 12-month period. 28% of those were escalated to stage 2 of the council's process. So for those who aren't aware, we operate a 2-stage process. A complaint comes in and it gets investigated and dealt with by the most appropriate lead specialist. Complainants then have the opportunity of coming back and saying, I'm not satisfied, you haven't addressed my concerns, you've missed something, and such like, and it gets reviewed by myself and the relevant director. If they still remain concerned after that point, then of course they can escalate that to the local government, social care and local government ombudsman, which has now changed. I'm pleased to say that over 2024-25, there were no investigations or negative decisions from the local government ombudsman, and that the distribution of complaints across the council was similar to previous years. On the other side of the coin, we had 196 compliments. Tend to always get more compliments than complaints, which is nice. They tend to be more focused on our visible frontline services, bin men, streetwise operatives and such like. Normally, I would leave it there and say, that's it, and open the floor up for questions, and that would be the end of the report. However, I really would like to take the opportunity to manage your expectations for when I sit here in 12 months' time, simply because we have already received the same number of complaints for the entirety of last year in the first 5 months of this year. So unfortunately, I don't think I will be sitting here saying that everything is the same as it always has been. The percentage of escalations to stage 2 is currently lower than previously. So whilst we've had a lot of complaints in at the stage 1 level, not as many are escalating. And while some complaints have been sent through to the local government ombudsman, none have been investigated yet. That's a longer term process. I am actually quite pleased that residents are finding our complaints process easy to use and that they feel that it's worth them investing their time in complaining to us, because it gives us the opportunity to put things right that have gone wrong. I don't necessarily see it as anything other than a healthy sign of engagement, but perhaps I won't be saying that next year. We'll wait and see. But I just wanted to say, in terms of managing your expectation, I'm happy with where we are for this year. Things are not looking as good in terms of the numbers, but the fact that we're not escalating as many, we've not got any negative decisions from the LGO, I don't necessarily see those as bad things at the moment. I'm happy to answer any concerns you've got about the report as it stands at the moment.
Thank you, Charlotte. It's great to see that we've got lots of compliments alongside the complaints, and I've seen the statistics, but you've said that we are continuing to, this year, the complaints are going up. And I can also see from the data here that there are a lot of complaints made in terms of neighborhoods and finance and corporate services. Those are the 2 areas where there are a maximum number of complaints, some escalating to stage 2. Are we seeing any particular themes around those 2 areas? And also, what is the council doing about exploring those particular themes and ensuring that we do not get the same type of complaint in this upcoming year?
Thank you very much, Councillor Parekh. The increase that we've seen this year is not in what we call neighbourhood services, our frontline bin men, streetwise and such like. That's pretty steady. The increase that we've seen this year is almost all in our council tax department. Now, there have been some changes in legislation, and if you watch TV, read the newspapers and such like, you've got prominent media figures not happy with the way enforcement is done, encouraging people to question what they're doing, all of which is perfectly fine. But what it's doing is opening up avenues, plus AI, as we were discussing earlier on. Unfortunately, you can see when a letter of complaint is generated by AI at the moment. But it's making it easier for people to complain about where they stand in regard to their council tax. We don't actually think that there's a big problem in the way that we're applying our policy. We have had a couple of instances where we've gone back and had a look at that just to make sure that we're happy as officers that that is the case. And I will remind you that you have already flagged up a concern with council tax and enforcement, and I believe it's on the scrutiny agenda for next year. So obviously those complaints that we're seeing coming in and their investigations will feed into that scrutiny review as well.
Presumably, if a complaint is vexatious, it doesn't get taken forward. Will we be seeing those in these numbers? Because what concerns me is the general climate, what we're living through at the moment. People seem to be more aggressive, and therefore I'm wondering if that's filtering into more, I'm not happy with this, I'm not happy with that. So yes, we
do unfortunately find that if people can be very aggressive, very vexatious. We have a vexatious complainants policy which sets out how we deal with people, and we don't often have to do it. I have to say we have a very high tolerance level because we understand this is people's lives. This is their money. It might mean the choice between paying their council tax or buying some groceries. Unfortunately, at the moment, we want to make sure that we are as open and honest as we can be, as fair as we can be within the law. But at the end of the day, it's the council's responsibility to collect the council tax. So we do have a vexatious complainants policy. We have had to write to people and tell them that we are applying it, but it takes a long time to get to that point. Oh, and with regard to your other number, yes, the figures will be included because we do actually, whether they're angry and aggressive, even in the very first time they contact us, we still deal with their complaint. We only really classify them as vexatious when we've had several more letters, emails, phone calls and such like after the point where we've exhausted all avenues for satisfying them.
Just ask, do we know how we compare with other councils in terms of number of complaints and number of satisfied customers?
We don't compare as in benchmarking with our complaints and compliments figures that we deal with, though I suspect we probably could do so if that was required. But the report doesn't contain a table of the Ombudsman investigations because they do issue that against, you compare against the other councils in Notts, and that's in the report.
The complaints that make it to the Ombudsman, what is the percentage that the Ombudsman uphold the complaint?
From memory, a really bad year was the year that they investigated 6 and upheld 1 partially. That was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Thanks for that. That's a good percentage. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think in general it is a good thing, I suppose, that we are receiving high levels of complaints, because that is a sign that people are finding ways to be able to complain. Because I think as long as we're aware of the fact that most of the complaints are resolved quickly, which seem to be, and most people aren't making vexatious claims, that as we've just heard, I think it is a good thing that people are able to use technology to reach forward and do that, because there are lots of examples of people who have been put on, well, lots of examples, but there are some examples of people who have been on the wrong level of council tax, or put in energy companies, for instance, on the wrong tariff and unchallenged and paying over the odds for many, many years. So I just think it is a good thing that people can do that on the whole, because they can reduce their bills if necessary and make their lives easier. So I think it is a good thing. I think knowing that that's probably what's driving most of this, just being able to manage that is going to be difficult, because I understand that that's, it requires time and effort, doesn't it? But I think in general we should be pleased that people can reach out and try and find out these things, because any mistakes not good for the individual, is it? So thank you.
And I think on that, it's like looking at the statistics year on year. I think we're kind of seeing the increase maybe coincided with when we had an upgrade on the website as well. So it kind of made it a lot easier to navigate in order to find how to put a complaint or feedback into the council. So maybe that as well was a good thing, that people then found it easier and go like the website where, oh God, how do I navigate this in order to kind of raise a complaint? And certainly with the website, it's probably made it a lot easier, and that's kind of then helped with people being able to feed back in. Is there anything with some of the issues, and I don't know with how many there is, or any of those kind of would get kind of fed back to councillors as well, in order to be kind of that link in with the community, depending on what the nature is of them? I know like with some of the bins and that, but if it was kind of a certain issue that was in a local area and there was like a trend that was going on, like with the ward councillors, has there been anything with ward councillors getting involved in any of those kind of complaints?
The only one that springs to mind is actually from this year, and has been about asylum dispersal centres. And ward councillors have been, when we've had a collection, a little flurry of complaints about one issue from different residents, we've made sure that ward councillors are kept up to date with that, just in case that's where the residents go to get their answers, because obviously if you can answer those queries, it stops them complaining to us because it's already been dealt with.
I'll go to the recommendations. It's recommended that corporate overview scrutinise the data provided in relation to customer feedback in 2024-25 and consider whether the data in specific areas require further investigation or scrutiny. Do we kind of feel that there's anything? And I kind of asked that on recommendation B on what Charlotte has told us potentially that could be looking at this group next year. If there's anything that we would like officers to look at in preparation to look at, or information that we'd want, like Councillor Comblack said about how we would compare at that baseline level data with other councils. I know the Ombudsman might be easier to get hold of than other councillors, but it might be if we're experiencing a high number of council tax related inquiry, feedback, complaints, etc. That it might be that to find out if that's all councillors are experiencing the same thing in order to learn.
I was going to say as well, I think, like so you mentioned earlier, looking at any trends of things and identifying them early. Now, I'm sure you are doing, but like seeing where the patterns are so that we can intervene quicker, so that they don't stockpile and become more problematic. That's something we want to do, isn't it? I think.
So if we're content with those, can I have a show of hands just to that we've met those requirements, recommendations? Thank you very much. House to work. Right, next item on tonight's agenda is local government reorganisation, decision making and governance. This is just to reiterate, we are not talking about the options of local governance reorganisation. It is just about the decision making process, and where the decision will be there will be a decision made at council for a proposal to go to cabinet. So in Thursday's extraordinary full council meeting, and then to cabinet next week tonight, in fact, and that it's recommended that the key decision under the urgency provisions is exempted from the calling procedure for that to full council from that cabinet decision. And that's what we're kind of looking at. So it's not the actual options, it's the decision and where it goes to cabinet.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Apologies, first of all, this is not something that was on your radar. It wasn't something on my radar until 2 days before the agenda was published. But we need to make sure that we've tied up. So if you've read the report, I know you've had an email from Adam also with some information in here, but this is a procedural matter. This is just to make sure that all of you have been consulted about the way the decision about the LGR proposal is going to be made. So because it's quite complicated, I'm going to read what I have prepared, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got. I may at some point go, that is not one that I have got the answer for, but if that is the case, I will make sure that the monitoring officer answers that query and gets back to you first thing tomorrow. You've got a long meeting potentially on Thursday evening. I know that there will be a lot of points there, so I will just reiterate what the chair has said in this is about how we make the decision moving forward.
I'm a bit confused because this is usurping the governance procedure. Really, this should be going to the Corporate Governance Committee. It shouldn't be coming to an oversight committee. We're talking about governance, and this is poor governance. To come to a committee like this that isn't geared up for governance, this is an oversight committee. I'm a bit confused why it's coming to this committee and not going through due process, which is governance.
So there are two reasons why it's here. One is because of the fact that this meeting is in the diary. With other meetings elsewhere in the diary, we did have a discussion about putting an extra governance meeting in, but we felt that this was a borough-wide issue. It was a key decision. It affected everybody in the borough. And by bringing it to this group, we had the opportunity to consult with all chairs of scrutiny, chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny, rather than just governance. Putting an extra meeting in the diary would have been very, very difficult to do. This one is already here, and you're already here, which is great. So I know what you're saying. In an ideal world, we wouldn't need to suspend our normal procedures for a start. The process is so very, very tight and speedy that we are having to do it this way to make sure that it gets done. May I read through what I've got and then?
Yeah, what is the time period that you've got to get this in for?
The government deadline for the proposal is the 28th of November.
And you've got to have this in place by then?
Yes, we've
Right.
got to have it in place before next Tuesday, which is Cabinet. Yeah. Let's come back to it. Let me just go through what I've got. So,
That's been imposed by government, that date. It's not the council that's imposed that date.
Yeah, I'm just merely making the point that we're talking about a governance issue outside of the governance process. So to me, in my mind, that isn't good governance, but I'm happy to go with it. I'm just marking it that I don't think it's great governance to do this. I understand we're under pressure by the government, but good governance is good governance, and as the chair of governance, that's what I'm here to do.
that's okay. The decision to submit the proposal to government is an executive decision. So it's to be taken by Cabinet at their unscheduled, their new meeting. It's an extra one, next Tuesday, 25th. As local government reorganisation is a matter of borough-wide significance, it's a key decision and has been published as such on the council's forward plan. Ordinarily, this would mean the suspension of any activity following this decision for a period of 7 days following the meeting to allow for the decision to be called in. As an officer that's been in this council for a very long time, we do not do call in very often. And when it is done so, because there are very serious concerns that an issue has not been given due consideration before a decision is made. There are circumstances where call-in needs to be suspended, and the Constitution allows for this by consulting with the leader, the relevant cabinet member, and the chair of the most relevant scrutiny committee. In the case of local government reorganisation, call-in needs to be suspended to enable the chief executive to submit the Greater Nottinghamshire proposal for LGR to the government by the deadline of the 28th of November. Failure to submit the local government reorganisation proposal by the 28th of November deadline risks that the council's proposal is not considered by government, and this would be prejudicial to the interests of both the council and the borough's residents. This report has been brought forward this evening to enable consultation with all scrutiny chairs and vice chairs. What I'd like to do is just run briefly through all of the different opportunities that councillors have been given to engage with the process to date. And these include the engagement exercise that was run for 6 weeks over the summer, roadshows in key towns and villages over the same period, engagement with town and parish councils through the Town and Parish Council Forum, and also a questionnaire and a presentation at the Nottinghamshire Association of Local Councils. There was a member briefing on the 9th of July to coincide with the publication of council papers in July. A member workshop on the 14th of October, including roundtable discussions on proposals. Member survey on workloads and provisions. and a member briefing on the 12th of November to coincide with the publication of the agenda for the extraordinary council meeting, which will be on Thursday evening. We have also taken the decision to call that extraordinary meeting of council on Thursday to enable all councillors to debate the proposal document, allowing for much wider scrutiny of this borough-wide issue. You'll notice that the report also asks for your support to create a member working group moving forward to provide yet more opportunities for engagement as we move to the transitional phases of LGR. I'd happily take any questions that you have, mainly of clarification. Don't test my technical knowledge. I'm asking for your support of the 3 recommendations on page 51 of the agenda pack.
I'd like, well, there's 7.1, the member working group. Obviously, that's a good idea in theory. We've just had a few people message from the wider opposition groups concerned about the numbers of people on that working group and how we can get more of a kind of cross-party emphasis into that, because throughout this process so far, without trying to be very politically neutral myself on this point, most of the decision-making process has been entirely on which proposal we're putting forward, which at the meeting will be 1B. That has been entirely led from one side of the council chamber, the exclusion entirely of the views and thoughts of the other side of the chamber. That's just the way that democracy works here. But if we're going to have a genuine working group looking at what's best for the borough going forward, which would have been nice earlier on, but it looks like we're creating that now, we would like to see more voices heard at that table, because in that opposition group there are at least 7 different political organisations represented. Some of them, one of them very new, like Reform being one councillor that's just recently become a Reform councillor, but we've got independents from Eastleigh, we've got independents from Bingham, we've got independents from Rushcliffe, even though we're all in Rushcliffe. We've got Lib Dems, we've got Greens, and we've got the Labour group. And we just want to make sure that there's good representation from all if we're going to do the right thing here. So either making that group bigger, I've heard the number was 9, we can make it more, or something along those lines. I think that would be welcomed. That was my first question. I've got another questions later, but if you ask that, well, that was my point.
Thank you for that. That had filtered through to us today. We will take a look at doing it. What I would recommend for this group is that you're now going to provide feedback, which we're going to circulate to all councillors tomorrow, in preparation for Thursday meeting. So they also, at council, you've got another recommendation to support. So if you are in support of that across the corporate overview group, what I would recommend is that at the end of the discussion, that is your recommendation, is that we look to expand the size of the working group so that all political groups can be represented. And having had a look at the figures, it is possible to do. So that isn't going to be a problem from that point of view. It's just making sure that we know how that will work.
Thank you.
Did you say you got another question?
Well, it's another point for some clarification.
Yeah, if you want. You want to?
I don't want to stir things up too much. I just it's 4.1 supporting information. It's just the structure of what's meant to happen: A, B, C, D, E, and F, which talks about proposals should show how councils in the area have sought to work together and come to a view that meets local needs. I know the timescale's been imposed, and I know the timescale's been short. I'm not entirely convinced that anyone involved in the process could hold their hands up, and I don't just mean here, I mean across the board, across the whole county and city, could hold their hands up and say that that has been entered into in the greatest of open-mindedness. I don't think the borough here necessarily, it was very early in the process, was it made clear what we wanted or what some people wanted, and there wasn't really an open consultation with other councils, I don't think. So I don't know, I'm just looking for clarification about how much you think that was worked on. I don't know whether that's for here or for another meeting, but before I vote for it, I'd like to have some idea, because we've just heard that the Reform County and Rushcliffe are now working together, but I think that's just happened in the last few days from what I've heard in the media, and Is that what we're calling the Greater Nottinghamshire option? Is that the new branding of that? Because so just a few things I want to clarify, and then stronger community engagement. And Beth, I'm a little bit concerned that maybe it's something that's going to come into the working groups afterwards, but we are going to end up, and that's not through the choice here, I understand that, but we're going to end up with the removal of a layer of government for apparently efficiency means, but that's going to be a democratic deficit of sorts, especially in West Bridgford. So I'm just wanting to know what we here have actually planned as options to parish West Bridgford and make it a town council, or to, and how the local parishes, like I know that some of them out in the Vale of Belvoir, for instance, have very difficult to get clerks to operate around those areas and do that. How are we going to pass powers down? I know that we don't know that here yet, but what discussions?
You're going on to kind of out of what we're actually discussing in this agenda
item. I'm going to vote for it, I kind of want to know, that was all. But fine.
Okay,
Thank
you. You're not today, you're not voting for the proposal.
No.
So I think the chair's right. I think we're straying into, well, how are we going to do this? And the answer to those questions are for Thursday. I will say that on your first point there, which was about a clarification of how the councils have been working together. Oh, and by the way, yes, option 1B is now called the Greater Nottingham proposal. Same thing, different branding. We had to come up with a name that was better than option 1B because we were all completely fed up of saying that. But the work that went on, that started at the very beginning of the year, March time, across the whole of Nottinghamshire. So there's been an awful lot of work that is common to all councils, that all councils have been engaged in. That includes all of the work that the finance officers have done, pulling together the financial plan for what that is. And the way that I would describe it is that there has been a lot of collaboration with a pool of information that is common to everybody. So pulling together what systems people use, the finance information, how they deal with common issues such as their democratic services and things like that. So things that happen in every authority, lots of information has been pulled together, people have been working on that. And then around the time in July when we as a council decided actually our favoured option is the 1B option, County did the same thing. So County and Rushcliffe have been working together since July to pull together how might we see it working? What do we think is the best way of managing, creating these two new unitary authorities? At the same time as Rushcliffe and County did that, other districts across Nottingham went, oh, actually, we like the 1E option. They've all been working together on that. Our proposals cover 2 unitary authorities. Their proposal covers 2 unitary authorities. The City Council decided that actually their idea was somewhat different to either of those. And today they've published their proposals, which is for a expanded city and the rest of the county. I haven't had a chance to read it. I don't know if they've got special names for all of that. But what we're expecting is that 3 proposals will be submitted on the 28th. There are 2 councils in Nottinghamshire that haven't yet decided whether they would support any of those 3 or none, which they are totally able to do, but they have been engaged in those processes. In fact, it's Ashfield District Council that have been managing that collective, everybody works together part for the core services. And what it means is that they've been able to pull together information. So all of the proposals are working on the same base information.
Okay, thank you. No, I just very good. Thank you for clarifying that, because I don't think I'll get the same level of detail on Thursday because there'll be lots of other things happening. So I wanted what you've just said to be out there. Thank you. That's good.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support what Councillor Gaunt said in his first point about the makeup of this working party, and I'm pleased to hear that Charlotte says it's not impossible for us to increase the level of that working party. In your statement, Charlotte, you used the words all borough, and I sincerely think that if the member group is kept to 9, there's going to be portions of the borough that are completely excluded from that. They'll have no representation on that. The ones that have specific independence for a particular area. specifically will lose out on that. So I really would like to see, when we come to vote on the recommendations, that recommendation C reflects the fact that we want to see that group makeup changed.
Well, I think that can form part of recommendation C, of where we scrutinise in the work programme and the terms of reference of it, and if there's like any recommendation for it to be increased, and then to whatever number can be looked at, because of course it's got like with proportion representation and all those kind of things, in order to make sure that everybody is equally included, and that type of what I'm hearing from councillors. So I don't think we need to. I think it forms part of C, doesn't it? We don't need to have a specific wording for a D.
No.
That's what I'm just saying.
Yes, I'd just like to concur with that I think, yes, if it's possible to expand the group, I think that would be good, because I thoroughly agree that everybody should be able to take part. I think we've been very inclusive in our consultations. I don't think everywhere has, and it's been very difficult within the time frame that we've been given. So yeah, I would like to see that expanded.
Any other questions? Any other points? No. Okay. So we've got that it's recommended that corporate overview accepts the update on local government reorganisation, including opportunities for member engagement provided so far. B, acknowledges that for the reasons given in this report, the decision of Cabinet to submit the Council's proposal to central government by the 20th of November 2025 is a key decision to which the urgency provisions exempting it from call-in procedure apply. And then C, recommendations to Cabinet that a new member working group is constituted to provide oversight over the next phase of LGR programme, and that's to, as part of that, to include about increasing the number of councillors on that working group. Yeah, task and finish group is the proper title, and then of course, like anything around quorum that would be affected with X number that it increases to is then applicable as well as part of that terms of reference. Yes.
Will substitutions be allowed?
Yes, it's in the terms of reference. So based on, can I have a show of hands for those in favour of those? Thank you very much. Right. Item 7, feedback from scrutiny group chairman. So go around clockwise. Councillor Pratt, if you've got anything.
Thank you, Chair. We had a scrutiny group in October, and we discussed flood risk update. The principal officer from Nottinghamshire County Council, who's a lead flood authority, gave us a presentation and clarified the rules about what is Nottinghamshire County responsible for, which is they're the lead for surface water, groundwater and ordinary water courses. What is the Environment Agency responsible for, which is the main rivers. What is Severn Trent responsible for, which is sewers, and Trent Valley Internal Drainage Board is responsible for drainage in certain areas. So we scrutinized all the capital schemes, Section 19 reports. We listened to what does Rushcliffe have in place in terms of combating increasing floods, because Rushcliffe has experienced 2 extreme floods recently in since 2023, and we looked at the risk management plan, the flood management plan that Rushcliffe has, the resources that we have, and we are one of the county's largest sandbag stores. And overall, it was a positive scrutiny meeting. However, there was some concerns where councillors have expressed frustration about contacting Severn Trent, and as a result of that, there was an action proposed, which is the Director of Neighbourhoods, Dave Banks, to send a formal letter to Severn Trent about communication issues. From what we heard at the meeting was that Severn Trent is proposing a new team of officers, community liaison officers who will be engaging more with the councillors, but we don't yet know the details. And we discussed the work programme for next year.
Thank you. Yeah, we had our last meeting on the 25th of September. It was quite a productive meeting. We had presentations from our external auditors, internal auditors. We also had draft annual audit report. The council is moving forward positively, and there was really no concerns over the internal external auditing. We're in a good financial state because the financial report was also produced for the forthcoming year. We're well placed as a council to keep our budgets in order. In fact, our reserves are going up rather than down at the moment, so that was really positive. One thing that was noted, that the cost of auditing is really gone crazy in the last 10 years, sort of 4 or 5 times more than what it was than 10 years ago. Asked for reasons, really couldn't give reasons other than it's going for review, so let's kick it into the long grass. So couldn't really push any more on that. So that was that. We had the statement of accounts, as I said, we're in good condition. Risk management report, risk management process. Looked at the risk management register, things that are dropping off, new emerging risks coming on. Nothing really to report other than what would be normally on that sort type of report. We also looked at the work plan moving forward, and it's looking rather busy for corporate governance group. So open to any questions on that. No, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure everybody's seen that we've been incredibly busy, which is why our last meeting was cancelled, because there was nothing on our work programme. I have to say, I hark back to our meeting in July, which we had with the Freeport. As a result of that, we did receive a written report, which was intended to address the issues that we raised. But it seems to be an incredibly slippery subject. It seems to be like nailing jelly to the wall. The timeline that they are looking at is somewhat frustrating, as we were all so excited with the site and the development and the proposals that were being put forward for the site. But if they are going to be enacted in the timeline they proposed, I am very worried that our windows of opportunity will be closing. So I would like, if we can, to get them to come back and talk to us again, as we proposed at the meeting. And I believe, given the report, that there is a future date is to be provided at some point. Otherwise, I have very little else to report. We have got something on our diary, which is to look at shared ownership and other affordable housing. And I wondered if it could be incorporated within that. I have a Park Homes within my ward, and there are one or two concerns similar to those around shared ownership and affordable housing. And I wondered if Park Homes could be included within that scrutiny.
We can do, but I think it probably can be incorporated. I've made a note.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So that really is all I have to say, unless you have something to add to my work programme.
To find out on 2 items time. Is there anything further discussion from that report that's come from Councillor Cumberland with the Freeport with a scrutiny matrix? If it's kind of deemed that it's been different from what was this kind of scrutinised previously in order for a new submission because of the workload.
I think having had some conversations internally, I think that the idea of I think it's a 7-page PDF document's been circulated to all councillors with the hope that it would satisfy some of the concerns that the group had following the meeting in July. I think what I can feedback now is that there are still some concerns, and we will see what we can do about that.
Okay, thank you. Item 8 on tonight's agenda is feedback from lead officers.
You'll be pleased to know that I have nothing further than what's in the reports.
Okay, thank you. Item 9, consideration of scrutiny group work programme. So we have 2 scrutiny requests to look at tonight. One of those is one that has been rewritten from the previous meeting that was requested from Councillor Phillips, asylum dispersal and contingency accommodation, including HMOs. So that has been earmarked for communities in January, as we discussed at the previous meeting. And then, so I'll take that one first for us to discuss, because it has been rewritten. Have you got any questions? Anything on that? Yeah, Councillor.
It was originally a request from Councillor Phillips. Was Councillor Phillips involved in the rewrite, or was it done by other people?
The redrafting has been done internally, but Councillor Phillips was involved at each stage of that, and we had discussions with him as well as feeding in the views from this group. Councillor Phillips was given the opportunity to agree the revised scrutiny request before it was sent to anybody else, and it was also circulated to yourselves before coming here this evening, so that if you had any concerns, they could be raised at that point.
So if we don't have any further concerns, as I say, it has been put down for communities for the next meeting in January. Do we need to vote on each one? It's just recommendations, isn't it? And the next scrutiny request is from Leanne Ashmore, Deputy Chief Executive and Director of Planning and Economic Growth. That is the asset management strategy and acquisitions and disposals policy. And I think that one is recommended to go for growth and development scrutiny. So I didn't want so leaving it till the end to let them, they've got another item for their scrutiny group. If we have any questions or queries on the of the request or anything like that, or if we're happy for it to go forward. Okay, thank you. So that the final for us to go and look at is the actual work programme. So our next for corporate overviews on the 24th of February. So the standing items there, but then the rolling item that we have is the midpoint review of the corporate strategy. governance scrutiny, as Councillor said, is you've got 4th of December, but then the 5th of February is very meaty with the amount of items that is on there prior to the end of the financial year. And then we've got growth and development, which has got space on the 28th of January, which I'm presuming that item can go into that slot. And then on the 25th of March, shared ownership and other affordable housing. And as yet, nothing for July and October's meetings. So do ask for councillors and officers to submit anything for growth and development potential that could be scrutinised. And then we've got community scrutiny group, next one on the 22nd of January, which is the asylum disposal and contingency accommodation, including HMOs. 2nd of April, West Bridgford contact points, and then the carbon management plan update. Nothing currently for July, and then October, review of the debt collection agents by RBC. So just going on to our recommendations for this group, to consider any additional items for scrutiny from the current Cabinet forward plan, corporate strategy, medium-term financial strategy, capital investment strategy and transformation and efficiency programme. They determine any additional topics to be included in the scrutiny group work programme for 2025-26 for each of the scrutiny groups as presented on newly submitted scrutiny requests. Review the current work programme for each of the scrutiny groups. And then we do have D is to recirculate links to scrutiny training already delivered and resources already circulated through councillors' connections in the next few weeks. And this is aimed to kind of just get people's thinking of what can be scrutinised and and how the scrutiny works and the putting the requests in. And then E is to organise training in the new year for current chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny, and extend this invitation to any prospective chairs. So if we've got any questions on those, take it with
Thank you. Organising training, have you any idea if this will be done by an external training body, or is it going to be an internal thing?
I am talking to East Midlands councils because they do a very good chairs and vice chairs training. It would be daft for us to do it internally. I'm looking for them to either come in or to make sure that you can go on one of their courses.
The report says that only 3 councillors responded to provide feedback on scrutiny, which I think is disgraceful, to be honest. But no examples of good practice were provided, and that's quite difficult unless you spend ages on YouTube looking at lots of other councils. Feedback predominantly focused on frustrations. I think I was one of those 3, and I felt that I put in notes that I'd made from an external scrutiny training event run by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, and I hope it was taken not as criticism, but as my colleague here said, as a critical friend, because that's what it was meant to be. I think we need to try and look positively at this. So any critique that comes is not meant to be bad, it's meant to be helpful. So I'm hoping that when we get some training, that's the sort of thing that will come out. We'll be able to say what we think is not working well, and that being a positive, not a negative.
Again, it's probably not for now, but I'll just, at some point in the process, throughout the 4 years of between elections or even longer, when do we look at the makeup of scrutiny groups properly? Because if we've got one scrutiny group that's only maybe getting 1 agenda item every 4, it doesn't mean I'm not a criticism of that group, but maybe what its overarching view of isn't really as essential? Can we look at the things that group is able to look at? Because communities seems to be getting one or two things nearly every time, going on to the point where we're putting meetings into October 2026 for them to get those things on the agenda, because we're a community-based organisation, aren't we, dealing with community issues? So that's always going to be packed. Growth and corporate, the corporate overview, not corporate overview, governance scrutiny group is always going to have a massive load of stuff, because we should be constantly looking at all these things, and they're all itemised through the year at strategic points to get to do the best governance that we can. But I was just wondering, and it isn't a criticism of the growth and development scrutiny group at all as a thing, but are we able to look at what that group could look at and sharing the burden? Are there some community-based things that could be looked at as a corporate or a growth thing? And just wondering, because it would seem more effective use of people's times, wouldn't it? And
I think the nature of the two scrutiny groups, communities always finds it's easier for items to come up to be scrutinised as opposed to necessarily growth, because like you say, we are like community based. It's with councillors on the ground, they're seeing things kind of that are there and now within their communities, whereas growth's kind of looking at just slightly differently to like the future and with the planning and that kind of items. But historically, I've always remembered that there's always been a lot more onto communities than there has been necessarily with growth. But both of them have kind of reduced in the number of items, even with communities. I can remember where communities were having 3 items nearly regularly on their agendas and having to discuss. I remember chairing a communities where we had quite 3 really meaty items, and it was because of the time frames in order to look at when we could get external partners involved. So sometimes it is that nature, but I think it also aligns itself with the lead officer's portfolio as well. So it will be kind of what sits under those areas, the groups.
well, could I just then, obviously when we're doing our training for how to do scrutiny matrices or whatever we call them now, could we also look at maybe an overview of which things would fall under growth and development scrutiny? What items could you bring? What sort of things could a group bring or a person bring to that scrutiny group? Because I don't know if everyone's fully aware, that's all. Because I think there are things that people would like to bring but don't really know how, and it's partly because we don't know necessarily how to fill in the forms properly, or there might be reasons, that's all.
Well, if there is councillors who don't know, best thing is to go and ask the officers. Is that they kind of generally want to ask the actual subject, and then it's kind of where we come here and discuss and which kind of group it then would fall under. I think it's just for councillors just to come in with any issue, and then it gets looked at to where it would then fall under. I think it's not necessarily thinking, oh, I've got to think of something for that group. It's just, in some respects, it's anything for any group that they're needing to look at. Sure.
I think growth and development historically probably had more on its work programme. I think it's probably reflected a lack of work in the times that we find ourselves in at the moment, that the council itself is actually working incredibly hard, but we are working very hard at reorganisation. And sad to say, the growth and development is possibly taking a bit of a backseat. When we do get items, they tend to be fairly meaty. And hopefully, when we get over the new year, maybe we shall get something else coming forward. But also, I think I would say, as far as communities are concerned, everyone is part of a community, and therefore everything in our everyday life affects us. And so requests for scrutiny come more freely to communities, I think. Growth and development is probably takes a bit more thinking about.
I was just listening to Councillor Gaunt and what he said about growth and development scrutiny group, and I just put on AI about items that fall under growth and scrutiny development groups, and something that's come up, and I do think it affects us in the borough, is considering how to influence telecommunications infrastructure via partnerships with the county council. And I think telecommunications, I mean, the broadband, the signal that we have in a lot of areas in the council is quite not great. Uh, um, yeah, yeah, and I wonder whether that, because we're discussing what could we put in growth and development scrutiny group.
How long ago is it since we last did it? I don't know whether
I don't know without going and checking, but I think Tracy's right. I think it's been within the last 2 years.
Okay, so it's been done.
Yeah, it's been done.
Okay, I'll share that with you what I found.
It was your request, wasn't it?
Yeah, because yeah, like Councillor Gaunt, I was wondering what other areas how can we keep Councillor like busy, basically?
Yes, it was my hobby horse, and it still is, because I'm afraid to say mobile signals and broadband seem to be getting worse, and I think that's because there's greater demand. I think, yeah, we aren't keeping ahead.
I think we're just slightly jumping onto actually doing a formal scrutiny request. So I would encourage you to kind of get together and then put it informally for us to through the process that we have to discuss. I totally agree with the rationale behind it and it to be looked at and everything like that. And it might even find some others looking through AI that
Maybe scrutinise it and resolve it. Two of those councillors.
Yeah.
No, I think it would be useful because they're not just talking about the people here. I think there's like 44 council members, aren't there? And I think if we want all of them to feel confident, and sort of lots of them are new in what things they can bring forward, I think that is quite useful. So I know there's ways we could do it. Just have a quick search on AI, or we could contact officers. But I think if we just in that training just did have a little overview of what the things would fall under, that would be really helpful for some people. That was all.
I think it might, if we're looking at with that training, is to kind of look at what we've done over potentially a number of years, like either what we've done in previous of this cycle and the last cycle, and those kind of items as well. I think it might be good because we do get the annual reports every June, isn't it? It's not May, that come through of what scrutiny groups have done that previous year and what they've looked at, but you can never potentially remember what they've then done the previous year and what could be applicable or to be looked at again. And certainly I think when it's not just the kind of the policy review or strategy reviews and that type of thing, but also just items where a councillor has submitted it, they've discussed, like got an item that affects the whole borough and they've wanted it to be scrutinised and looked at, because I remember there was one at communities where it was around sport provision and all that type of thing, not what the borough does but as a whole across. So for instance, that kind of thing could be looked at again because of the changes. So got any other questions on those, the recommendations? Yeah, councillor.
Not sure if it's a recommendation. I'm just talking about what we've got on programmes. At the last meeting, Councillor Perek reported on a meeting with MTVH, was it? Yes, I have to get the initials in the right order. And you felt that hadn't come to a conclusion and you were looking at wanting to continue that. And I just wondered if there was any way forward with doing that.
From what I understood is we can, because it was discussed, we don't bring it annually, and what, Charlotte, if I'm right, we had to resubmit a scrutiny request if we wanted MTVH to come back.
That is true, yes. I think that perhaps because that's a long period of time, if you have concerns that you still need, I think it's about encapsulating those in written form, sending an email through to the relevant director and saying, we've sat on it for a bit, we're not happy that this has been the responses we're getting and see if we can try a different route to get you the answers that you need. Because what's difficult is if we ask the partner back immediately or even beginning of next year, the chances are they're not going to have gone away and done anything different, because it's a long scale. In terms of implementing the changes that they've been discussing, it's difficult. That's why that 2 years sits there. So it allows them to go away, make the changes, hopefully improve things, and come back and tell us about it. So without having been at your meeting, it's difficult for me to say what those concerns are and how best to address them. But if you could articulate that into an email to the relevant director, then that's certainly a way forward.
What we could potentially do is in the new year, we can get together and look at a way of whether we want MTVH to come back at the later part of next year. And then perhaps outside this meeting, you and me can work together with the scrutiny request again and draft an email to the officer with the request, what are the areas which are still not resolved? And then we can ask them to come back after a year. So maybe not the beginning of next year, as Charlotte said, they need some time to work on the action plan, on the recommendations we have made, and then potentially towards October 2026. But the other issue, which I wasn't very clear about, is there was something mentioned last meeting about that it needs to go through the governance scrutiny group about the change to be made in the constitution if we want a partner to come back within a year's time. And I wasn't sure of how do I get that. If say we want MTVH to come back end of next year, how do we get it to the governance scrutiny group to get that changed and asking? Yeah, do you get my question?
It was a part of the constitution for any item to come back to scrutiny, that there is a certain period for it, that it kind of, if it's generally considered the same as what was already scrutinised, then it wouldn't fall. But of course it's in this constitution, so when governance comes to review the constitution, then that could be an aspect of the constitution that could be reviewed in order to change that period, because it's been 2 years, that it could be like 1 year, 6 months, 9 months, whatever gets decided at governance. So that would be where it would kind of start of governance looking at it, is through that review of the constitution, was my understanding. But it is for any item. But if it was, like Charlotte has said, is that if you detail what items and what areas were discussed on that subject from scrutiny and what weren't then answered or subsequently answered for any correspondence since or feedback from them, and then subsequent from that feedback, if that's then raised further questions, is to then liaise with the executive officer or your lead officer in order to then bring it back.
So
Well, if you look now at the governance scrutiny programme, the only point at which the constitution comes up is in June, at the constitution update. So the slight problem there is if we wanted to effect a change of the constitution this year coming, don't we have to have that constitutional change when we vote in May at our AGM? Or is the constitution, why would we have to wait till June to even discuss it? And would we be discussing it then, or can we bring it some other way to council to change that sooner? Because that would surely when do we next? Is it at the end of the 4-year cycle that we voted in the constitution, or can we amend it as it goes along?
If there are constitutional changes at this point, they're scheduled in for June because the constitution would be going in July to council. Right. So they need to be approved at council, but they'd come through governance for scrutiny first. So the fact that it's on there leads me to think that if there are changes, they will go through that way.
But I think the question is, how do we make sure that they get onto that at that point in June? Because that process might need to start quite soon, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Like who do we go through and how do we do it?
Yeah.
I think we're overcomplicating this, because a scrutiny group can make a request seconded and voted on. That's an item can come outside of its normal cycle. So that would be surely normal. There's a normal cycle and there's extraordinary cycle, just like tonight. So it doesn't have to be a constitutional change in my view, unless there's something in the constitution preventing that. If a scrutiny group makes an executive decision and votes on it, and it's then ratified, it then comes back sooner. And then it doesn't complicate the issue because officers note it down that this particular issue needs to come back in 6 months or 12 months. So otherwise we get into this silliness of changing constitutions when they don't need to be changed, and the constitution should be fluid enough to adapt to that. And if it's not, then we really need to look at the fluidity of the constitution and how it works in practice, you know, rather than in writing. So unless officers are going to tell me differently that this can't be done because of the constitution, and then if that's the case, then we need an extraordinary discussion at scrutiny to change the constitution sooner rather than later, because times change, things change. So that would be my view as a governance professional, how you get around that. Okay. To you guys.
Well, I think it is to get that discussion of forming something to come back and what it is to go and get MTVH, if I got it in the right order, of what we're looking to go and scrutinise them on, and when we can get them back in as well, because it's going with them.
So what we're saying now is we do a scrutiny request in the new year for him to submit it to the officer for them to come back within a year in October 2026 preferably. But the last time when I asked Charlotte about it, Charlotte, you said MTVH can't come back because the constitution doesn't allow for it, and it's in the constitution that items can only come on a 2-year basis. So I completely get your point. What you're saying is that the constitution needs to be fluid, but at the minute it is not fluid.
What it is it's what you're asking MTVH and what the items are that if you're talking about just bringing them back and just getting them to appear in front of you,
Okay.
then it might not.
Okay.
But if you're wanting them to come back because you've got further questions on what those questions are and what was asked in the previous meeting differs, then that could to come to get them back in.
Okay.
Because like if they've provided feedback since then, and then the group there's felt from the group that there's further questions and there's further clarification from them, then bring them back in.
Okay, so if it's a different item, it's a different question, then we don't need to go via the whole constitution change. Just submit it as a scrutiny request. If we're saying that they still need to come back in a year's time without the question being changed, then the issue of constitution arises.
You never know, is that free of what they've got in their diary, they might not be able to come back any sooner.
As with all scrutiny requests, I really do recommend you having a conversation with the most relevant officer to try and work out how you achieve, but firstly to encapsulate what it is you want to find out about, what you're going to achieve, what the outcome is likely to be and what difference it's going to make. And if you can have that conversation with officers, then they can help you build a scrutiny request that addresses your concerns. Then it's up to this group to decide whether that is acceptable and when it goes into the programme. As for the constitution questions, I am not the monitoring officer, and that is the person you need to talk to about. But circumventing the constitution is perhaps not where we want to be going.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about circumventing the constitution at all. It's really the poor language used there. I was saying that within a scrutiny committee, unless I misheard what your request was, that you was discussing an item and you wanted a more regular update of that item. Is that correct?
Yeah.
But what you're saying is the constitution is preventing you getting an update on that item because of the well, I'd say it's a very poor constitution then, because the scrutiny group is there for scrutiny. And if it wants to get something back, not something to be kicked into the long grass for 2 years, then it has the power, or should have the power. And if it hasn't got the power, we really need to have a proper look. So words like me circumventing the constitution doesn't come out of officers' mouths again. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, coming back to where we were, we wanted MTVH to come back again because we had scrutinized them after 8 years. There were lots of concerns raised by various councillors present at that meeting. And what we felt is 2 years again is a long time, and we wanted them to come back within a year to just give a further update on the recommendations that we had made at that meeting. So in a sense, we're not asking for a different scrutiny. We're not asking for a different, we're not making a different scrutiny request as such. We just want them to come back in a year's time, which my understanding was couldn't happen because we needed to go to the governance scrutiny group to change the constitution. So now I know the constitution update is not till June. So if you want to make that change for the June governance scrutiny group meeting, how do we go about doing that?
Well, that will be as part of that meeting, because it's not necessarily going to be for this group to kind of put a recommendation on that. It's going to form part of it, of reviewing the constitution as part of that review. So it'd have to be raised with the monitoring officer, because my understanding is the monitoring officer would make kind of what the changes are and and recommendations for potential changes to the constitution. So it's going to the monitoring officer to get that review. But in governance, it's not sections of it would get reviewed. The whole kind of thing would be. It's just that certain items get highlighted because of legislate or changes.
Surely a request report on actions, an update of a scrutiny item, shouldn't fall within the regulations for a scrutiny item. You're just requesting report on the actions. And therefore, I don't think that should fall within this constitution.
I think I'm going to go back to, if we've got concerns that the scrutiny didn't meet our requirements, we take them up with the lead officer and the relevant director. If what you've just said is actually what I'm looking for is an update on the things that we talked about, then I think Councillor Cumberlack is right. We can request a written update that gets circulated around. Doesn't necessarily have to come back to scrutiny. The way we do scrutiny, the terms of reference for the scrutiny groups, how we manage it, how we manage the work programme, all of that is in the Constitution. And if you go back possibly 4 or 5 years, when we were completely overwhelmed with scrutiny items and we were having the same people coming on a regular basis and telling us that everything was absolutely fine and there was no space within the scrutiny programme to look at anything in depth, you were going through 4, 5, 6 items a night, just listening to a presentation and not answering any questions and leaving the room. Nothing was getting scrutinised because you had to get through a lot of stuff. We changed the way we did scrutiny to allow you to scrutinise in depth and ask some very, very probing questions, both of officers and external partners that come through. We've now gone so far the other way that yes, the programmes are a bit light, but that's about generating more ideas and things coming up. It's not necessarily a bad thing that the programmes are light. It means that actually you don't necessarily have the concerns that you had 4 or 5 years ago. I accept that it may also mean that the way of getting stuff discussed at scrutiny is getting in the way. But the best way to resolve this particular issue is to have a conversation with officers rather than trying to get another item on scrutiny, because what you may end up with is a 5-minute presentation and you go, oh, okay, thanks very much, end of meeting.
I do want to sort of go against that slightly. I think it's not, we don't want reports from loads of different organisations. I think what we're finding frustrating to get across is that there are certain organisations, such as housing associations, that impact the lives of our residents quite highly, not because they're doing anything wrong necessarily, but just because people live in those houses, right? So we want to be able to bring those companies back to answer questions more frequently than once every 2 years, because we're living in a situation 2 years down the line before someone's fully scrutinising that is not, we don't think that's working. So we don't want to go back to where we were. All we're asking is, do we need to make a constitutional change to allow us to bring those people back to ask them questions on the same things within a 2-year framework, or can we do it? Can we start to bring them back within 1 year on the same questions? Because you said previously we can't. So if we can't, how do we bring that change in to allow us to do that? And that's what we were asking. Do we need to bring that to a scrutiny group, or is it a motion, or what do we do to affect that change that allows us to bring people like Metropolitan back more frequently? We're not looking at them just reporting at every meeting, just giving a PowerPoint presentation, obviously. But I think we just need to be able to hold those people, those particular organisations that we feel are putting some residents in difficult situations. We need to get them in the room to talk to them more frequently than once every 2 years. That's what we're asking. And if we need to change things, how do we do that? Not how do we write a matrix that's going to do something? How do we change the constitution as soon as possible, get that ball rolling so we can get it started? That's kind of what I thought we were asking. That makes sense. It's not about the scrutiny process itself. It's about one particular thing.
If I'm right in what you're saying, you're not asking for another scrutiny request.
No.
Which is governed by the Constitution.
Yeah.
You're wanting an update on the actions.
Yeah.
Have they taken place? And what were the results? So why can we not amend the scrutiny process to allow for that update on actions to be included at a scrutiny meeting?
And it won't cut, and it won't be.
Sorry, I mean, as far as I see it, the ability is already there via the scrutiny committee, because it gets put forward as a motion, gets voted upon, then it goes to council for full council, each scrutiny report. So it's there. So it's then said, yeah, it's coming back. You know, you're not talking about every item, are you? You're talking about the odd item. You know, and if we don't have that flexibility, what are we here for? Because a 2-year cycle is a long cycle. And if there is an issue in 2 years, that can become catastrophic to the council, which it seems that we're handcuffing ourselves. And I can't see, if you want to use the words usurp, I can't see how scrutiny committee cannot usurp itself, you know, in that, because it has the power to do that. It's a scrutiny committee. It's constitution. It's got councillors on it that are elected members that want this particular item to come back, and they are instructing officers to bring it back. That's what councillors are there to oversee and to instruct, and officers are there to do. And that's, it's as simple as that. That is the way it works. That's the way local government works, and in theory, how governments work. So I don't see why we're debating this. It's quite easy, but we're getting lost in the small print, I think. So what it needs is a discussion with the monitoring officer, because I don't think this is even an issue, if I'm perfectly honest. We spent half an hour discussing it, and I genuinely don't believe it's an issue, because we can resolve it very easily.
I think just on that point is that the ultimate person that this needs to go and ask of is the monitoring officer, who isn't here to go and ask about how do we do this? How do we get those changes implemented? Is it a motion? Is it a change through governance, looking at the constitution? So as Councillor Sins said, we are going through small print of this. We're going around debating on how, and going, I think, now over and over on it. So I think kind of going forward is to kind of look at what it was at that scrutiny group that wasn't fulfilled, speaking to the officers and getting them, like, either getting it to come back, looking at the getting, like, if there was an update from MTVH, or anything like that, in order to go forward, and then kind of looking at what it is in the constitution, how it's written, and getting that kind of change, so we're not having this kind of hands tied behind our back with 2 years situation with bringing stuff in order to then go forward. So
That's going to be an action point then.
I'll quite happy to,
Make that action point.
Can I also
can make
just
an action
say,
point for myself.
we already set a precedent because we already have annual reports that we scrutinise. So there's already a precedent for it. So why can't we do it?
I can I suggest that we're going around in circles and we're digging ourselves not into a hole but into a pit. Let's stop digging the pit and let's move on. I think we know what we're up for. It just needs clarification, really.
Yeah, happy to go with that recommendation where you take it to the monitoring officer. And just to kind of reiterate, we don't want written clarifications from MTVH. I've just kind of looked back at what the areas of concerns were around repairs, damp and mold, communication and tenant engagement. There were lots of issues there. So the point that Charlotte raised about that, if there are questions or recommendations which have not been actioned, or we have unanswered questions, we want them to come back. We don't want written representation.
Well, I think that's talking on specifics on that item. We're kind of also then talking about just general anything as well, and how anything could come back as well. So that's where it's the point's got to be raised with the officers in order to get them back in, and speaking to MTVH in order what it is for those specific areas. So we've got the 5 recommendations that I read out earlier, and then got an action for myself, and
I'll put it on as an action on.
yeah, that's right, for whoever.
Yeah.
That's fine. So if I can have a show of hands on those, unless you've got a question. Oh, that's fine. I didn't want to jump again in case you got a question. It's fine. So can I have a show of hands for those? Thank you very much. Right, just looking. That's everything on tonight's agenda. I'll close the meeting at 20:32. Thank you very much.